right. Well, we are in week number 4 of trust issues, and we are coming up to our last week. Next week will be our last week, so I hope you've been enjoying this series as we get ready to close it out. But we have a series we've been diving into this month is trust issues, because we have come to understand that everybody has them. Everyone who's ever had a friend or has had some sort of relationship has been exposed to having their trust broken, has gone through the pain of betrayal. And so we've come to learn quite a few things throughout this series. One of the things that I've learned that was really a big aha moment to me was that trust is not like a light switch. It's not all on or all off. Trust is there could be areas in our life that we can trust others. We don't have to trust them in every aspect of our life, but we can trust them in certain aspects of our life, which ultimately helps our relationships here on earth, which ultimately affects our relationship with God. And so that was a big aha moment. But the other thing we've been learning is the 5 observable behaviors that we can see in others of whether or not someone can be trusted or whether or not we can be trusted. And those 5 observable behaviors, as we looked at into each and every one of these, is week number 1, we looked at, trust is not something that we can just talk ourselves into. I can't talk you into trusting me, or you can't talk me into trusting you. Understanding is a big portion of being trustworthy, and so making sure that we understand someone's heart, someone's intention, someone's story, someone's life is a big portion of being trusted. And then what we learned in week number 2 was someone's intent. What was their intent in providing information to you, or providing a service to you, or hearing your story? What was their intent? I had to learn this the hard way, that not everybody has the intentions of me. Sometimes people have their own intentions, and they would want my life to benefit their intentions. And so, but the one time I went to Detroit and I asked some guy for the advice on a chili dog, he didn't give me the truth. He gave me the advice that was best for his intentions. And then I've suffered the consequences for that ever since. And so the intent is huge. The intent is huge. And so then last week we learned about ability. Does someone have the ability to be trusted with what you need from them? If I have an issue with my car, I'm going to go to a mechanic that ultimately has the ability to fix my car. I'm not going to go to an IT technician who knows nothing about cars. If I want my computer worked on, I'll definitely go to an IT person. But if I'm going to a mechanic, I want them to have the ability to be trusted with my vehicle. If I'm going to a doctor, I want them to have the ability to be trusted with making decisions for my health. And so ability was a big issue. And so today we are diving into character. The character of, does someone have the character to be trusted? Now, when we look at character, most of us would probably label character under someone who doesn't lie, someone who doesn't steal, or someone who doesn't cheat, which is a characteristic of character. It is a way to identify a portion of character. But if you're anything like me, you've also had someone in your life who didn't lie, didn't cheat, didn't steal, but still couldn't be trusted. And so character ultimately isn't necessarily tested when things are going great. Most of the time, character is tested when things are not going great or they're not going your way. That's when character really shows up. I don't know if you've ever met anyone where, they seem like a very calm person and a very in control person, a very logical person, and then out of nowhere they just yell or scream or they show some sort of outburst where you're like, whoa, like that was out of character. That's not like that person to do that. I get to observe a lot of people in things that I do, like coaching youth sports. And so when I coach youth sports, I get to see coaches' behaviors, I get to see players' behaviors, I get to see parents' behaviors, and I'll never forget, there was this mom on the team who was very calm, very relaxed, very positive, very encouraging. The game can be going through its ups and downs, and that mom would just remain peaceful and cheerful. And I just remember game after game thinking man, that mom is just so calm all the time, regardless of what's going on with the game. And so one time, the other team's parents were chirping and chirping and chirping and started chirping at the umpires and chirping at the coaches and chirping at me and chirping at the players. And then finally this mom lost it. And she just stands up and starts screaming and yelling and dropping F-bombs. And I was just like, whoa, that was so out of character. I would have never imagined this mom lose it like that. And then when we got home, Jill apologized. She's like, I'm really sorry. Like, I really should not have been, I should have kept it together. And I'm like, babe, listen, you got to keep it together. And so, just kidding. It wasn't Jill. It wasn't. But in all reality, have you ever noticed when someone's out of character? It's like it's not their normal process, right? And it's like, so what happens in those moments? Their character was tested at a capacity where they felt they couldn't, contain themselves anymore. They couldn't be the same person anymore. And at some point, they let go of who they try to be on a regular basis. And so this is what we want to dive into is what does it look like to be a person, regardless of what's going on around us, regardless of what other decisions others are making, how do we remain in the character of Christ in all circumstances? Now, we're looking at trust, and trust is about ultimately future of a relationship, and character is a huge portion of that. But when we look at the level of trust, we're putting our life into someone else's hands in some way, shape, or form. So trust is this. Trust is putting yourself at risk or in harm's way with another person because you believe they won't violate you. You believe they won't violate you. You believe they will have the character to remain the same person in all levels of circumstances. You believe that someone is going to understand your heart, someone's going to understand your circumstances, understand what's important to you, believe that they have the right intentions of making sure that they're in this for you, that they have the ability to be able to speak into your life, but that they also have the character to remain faithful to you and not hurt you even when you're not around, or even when they're being tested, when their stress is high, or when their anxiety is high. And so character is this. Character is a collection of qualities that make up one's capacity to navigate conflict, to process grief, carry stress, manage pressure, address fear, accomplish goals, feel emotion, be human, and still relate to people. This is the true test of character. When someone can demonstrate these qualities in all circumstances and remain who they are is a true test of character. Now, there's some writings that have been used for thousands of years, not decades, not centuries, for thousands of years. And I want to read to you something that has withstood the test of time. And I want to read a portion of these writings that describe character at its greatest capacity. That even in today's time, this description of character is being used not just in businesses, not just in books, but in coaching philosophies. And this writing here is about 2,000 years old, a little over 2,000 years old, and it still stands strong today. And it's found in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. And here's what it says: "For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith excellence, to excellence knowledge, to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly affection, to brotherly affection unselfish love. For if these things are really yours and are continually increasing, they will keep you from becoming ineffective and unproductive in your pursuit of knowing our Lord Jesus Christ more intimately. But concerning the one who lacks such things, he is blind. This is to say, he is nearsighted, since he has forgotten about the cleansing of his past sins." Now, this is a writing from Peter, and Peter is sharing this with all of us. But if you know anything about Peter's life, and you've ever kind of dug into Peter's story, you would look at this and be like, Peter, you just described a person who you are not. You just described a person that you have not been this person. And you would be right. Because as we looked into Peter's story, Peter was a lot like you and I. Sometimes he was on point. Sometimes he wasn't on point. Sometimes he was effective. Sometimes he was ineffective. Sometimes he was, secure in his faith. Sometimes he wasn't secure in his faith. So as I look at this, Peter's not writing this from like a higher ground. He's not writing this from a moral standpoint of saying, look at my life. This is who I've been all along. Because as we look at Peter's story, we can see some contradictions in Peter's character. One of them was in Matthew chapter 26, verse 35. This is like in the moment of like non-stress. This is in the moment where Peter's with his friends and he's with Jesus and he's having a meal, and then Jesus is telling him about this story about what's about to happen. And up to this point, things have been fine. Things have been normal. Things have been great. He's been walking with Jesus and the disciples, and he's been watching Jesus make a difference in people's lives, and he's been seeing miracles that he's never seen before, and he's really in love with Jesus right now. But then Jesus is having a meal behind closed doors, spending some time with his friends, and he's telling them, like, there's a time coming where I'm going to be arrested, and I'm going to be crucified. And Peter, you're going to deny me. And then Peter's like, no way. No. There's no way. And here's what he says in Matthew 26, verse 35. It says, Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, Jesus, I will never deny you. And all the disciples said the same thing, like, no, Jesus, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You think we're going to deny you? There's no way. There's no chance. We're by your side. We got your back. 100% to the end. Even if I have to die for you, I'm going to stand by you, Jesus. And Jesus says, just smiles and nods and says, moves on, right? And so then, sure enough, as you know the story, Jesus gets arrested. Jesus gets arrested, and the disciples ran. Now, Jesus is under the control of the soldiers, and then now his freedom has been taken, and he's looking at a mob who wants him dead, and anyone connected to him. And so sure enough, there's a moment now, Peter's no longer behind closed doors. Peter's no longer hanging out with his buddies. Peter's no longer just hanging out with Jesus. Now the circumstances have changed. Now things around him are no longer the same. Now Jesus is actually held as a prisoner looking to be crucified. And so sure enough, Peter gets identified by a lady in the crowd. And the lady says, hey, you look familiar. You look like you were one of those that were following Jesus. You look like one of Jesus' friends. And here's what Peter says. In Luke chapter 22, verse 57, he says, Peter denied it. He said, woman, I don't even know him. So what happened here? How does Peter go from, I'm all in, I'm gonna be by your side, I will never deny you, I have your back, to, I don't even know who that guy is. How dare you identify me into knowing who this person is? What changed? What happened? How does Peter go from one extreme to the other? How does Peter go from, being one person on this side and all of a sudden one person on this side? Well, the circumstances around him has changed. The desperation around him has changed. Jesus is no longer in a closed room with all of his friends. Now he's a prisoner, and then now Peter's freedom is being tested, and Peter's life is being tested. So desperation has changed around him, which in turn caused him to make different decisions. And here's what happens not just in Peter's life, but this is also what happens in our life. When desperation rises, standards fall. When the circumstances of our life are not put under pressure, we tend to let our standards of who we are fall. We tend to let our values fall because we're now facing whatever fear we're about to face when desperation has increased. And this is exactly what happened to Peter. Now, I know it's easy for us to look back and look at Peter's life and think like, Peter, you're such a jerk. How dare you do that to Jesus? But in all reality, I know because I, like Peter, also struggle in certain areas of my life that I also have not fully given over to God. And that's exactly what Peter was going through here. There was areas in his life that he had not fully given to God yet. There was areas in his life that God didn't fully own. There was portions of his life that Peter was all in for. There was a portions of his life where he understood that Jesus was God and he wanted to follow God and that he wanted to be in communion and relationship with God. He understood the power of God. He understood God's ability. But there were certain areas in his life where he had not fully given over to God yet, which in turn, when his character was tested, it caused his standards to fall. And the Bible warns us of these circumstances, warns us of people and behaviors in others when they are not the same person under stress, or not the same person under desperation, or not the same person when their freedom is tested. The Bible says, you be warned, but also be warned for those around you. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 19 through 20 says, like a broken tooth or a lame foot in reliance on the unfaithful in a time of trouble. In a time of trouble, like one who takes away a garment on a cold day. That's just messed up. That's really mean. Next time that happens to me, I'm going to be like, listen, you're like Proverbs 25. It says, don't take away the cold garment on a cold day. Like vinegar poured on a wound. It is who sings songs to the heavy heart. So the book of Proverbs gives us fair warning of look out for these behaviors in yourself and also look out for these behaviors in others, because when desperation is at its full test, you're going to see who a real person is in those moments. Not when everything's great. When everything's great, everyone seems to do a good job with not lying, cheating, or stealing, but also seems to be a good job with being consistent in who they are. But in the moment of stress, in the moment of desperation, this is when the real individual that shows up. And so there's been some trust minimizing qualities that we should be aware of in ourselves and in others to help us to know when can we be trusted and when can others be trusted. And so these are some minimizing qualities. These are the things that in ourselves and in others would be red flags on when not to be trusted. When someone gets defensive, when someone has explosive anger. Now, I just want to make sure I give an explanation. If you're Hispanic, it's part of your culture. It's okay. Okay, but it's just in your blood. You can't really control that. That's the excuse I use whenever you see explosive anger on my side. It's like, it's in my blood. It's in my heritage. It's not my fault. All right, so defensiveness is a red flag. Explosive anger is a red flag. Emotional instability, controlling behavior, neediness, gossip, or a victim mentality. These are all traits that are red flags on when someone cannot be trusted, or someone that demonstrates these things cannot be trusted. So as you look at this, you're probably thinking like, man, I've done a lot of those, and there's people in my life who have done a lot of those. So then by the next natural question is, who can be trusted? Who can we trust if these are things that we all struggle with? In John chapter 21, verse 15, it goes back to Peter's story, and it shares how Peter, in his pursuit of wanting to be more like Christ, began to work on those areas of his life that ultimately fell when desperation was high. And so Peter, when he was shown grace and forgiveness by Christ, he began to have more faith and more belief and more commitment into those areas of his life that were not as strong before when he denied Christ. And so Peter, in his pursuit, started to refine and work in those areas. And Jesus identifies these things in his life. And he asked these questions. He says this. He says, then when they had finished breakfast, meaning they had finished having a meal, they had finished having a conversation, they had finished talking about his denial, they had finished about working through those faults, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these do? Now, as we learned in week 1, when God asks us questions, God is not looking for information. He's not looking for an answer to a question that he doesn't know. He has one purpose in questions. He's looking for connection. When God asks us questions, it's not because he doesn't know the answer. It's because he wants to show that he wants a deep connection with us. So he asked this question to Peter, says, do you love me more than these do? And then Peter replied, yes, Lord. You know I love you. Like Peter saying, like, why are you asking this question? You know the answer. You know I love you. So then Jesus tells him, feed my lambs. If you love me, you will treat me the way you treat others. You will treat others the way you treat me. If you love me and you want to have a deep connection with me, don't just focus on the relationship with me by just you and I. Take this relationship and pass it on to those around you. And so here's what Jesus is saying in this moment. Your relationship with him is directly connected to your relationship with others. It's impossible for you to have this deep, meaningful, trusting, intimate relationship with God, but have very shallow relationships with others. The qualities and the characteristics and the skill sets of relationships are the same this way than they are this way. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, Pastor Moses, but God can be trusted more than others. And I agree with you. 100% I agree with you. Why? Because God, in those 5 observable behaviors, he has shown that he has the best understanding of my heart. He has shown that he has the best intent. He's in this for me. He has shown that he has the ability and that he has the character, and his character has withstood the test of time. But yet we still struggle with trusting God, don't we? Last week I told you, I don't doubt the ability that Christ has. I don't doubt his power. What I doubt is when he chooses not to use it. That is where I struggle with my relationship with God. I know God has the power. I know God has the ability. I know he can do things in my life that I can't do. But the area that I struggle with trusting God in is not in his ability. I struggle with trusting God in the area when he chooses not to use his ability. Because life would be so much easier if God would just listen to me. It's like, listen here, God. If you just do what I tell you to do, life would be so much greater. My kids would be so much greater. The people would like them more. I would like them more. Life would be so much easier. But yet, this is where the trusting God comes into play, right? I have to learn to trust God because he doesn't always choose to use his ability for the desires that I would like for him to choose his ability. But if I really believe that he understands me, and I really believe that his intent is driven by love, and I really believe that he has the ability, and I really believe that he has the character, then I have to believe that he's doing this for me. And for whatever reason he's choosing to be silent or choosing not to use his ability, I have to believe that it's in best interest for me, even when I don't understand. And so moving on with Peter's story, he says, feed my lambs, treat others as you would want as you would treat me, because in your relationship with others, you will also have a relationship with me. The depth of your relationship with others will direct the depth of your relationship with me. These two go hand in hand. So I'm sure you're sitting here wondering, like, oh my gosh, like I just don't know how I can trust again. I've been let down so many times. I don't know if I can really trust again. And how is it even possible to trust again? And I'm so glad you asked that question, because I have 6 answers for you. How to trust again. How to trust again. Number 1, you heal from what has happened. Heal from what has happened. Now this is very important. If you've been let down, which I'm sure you have, if you've been betrayed, which I'm sure you have, you don't go from being let down to back into restoration and reconciliation. You don't go back into a relationship as soon as you've been let down. This is a process that you need to heal. You need to allow that wound to close. And then once you give that time of healing, of being in that space, of letting those emotions play out, of letting the feelings, feel what they need to feel, and letting the wound close, then once the healing has happened, then you can move beyond anger or revenge to forgiveness. Then you can move into step 2, which is forgiveness. Now, this is a hard one for us to understand, because often when people hear like learn to forgive, they often think like, no, I don't want to forgive. I want that person to suffer, and I want that person to feel pain, and I don't want to free them from forgiveness. But here's the reality with forgiveness. The reality with forgiveness, it's really a freedom for you. You are the one that is set free when you learn to forgive. You are the one that lets go of the pain or the torture that someone else has caused you when you learn to forgive. I heard it said like this one time: it's not forgiving or unforgiveness is like drinking poison, but expecting the other person to be hurt. So if we don't learn to forgive, we're really the ones causing damage to ourselves. We're the ones that are holding on to the pain or holding on to the hurt, and that person has most likely moved on. And you're left with the pain, and you're left with the hurt. So forgiveness is really a freedom to you to let go of that pain and that hurt. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to go back into a relationship with that person. That doesn't mean you go back to trusting that person. That means that you are letting yourself free from the pain or the hurt of what that's happened so that you can move on to step number 3, which is ponder what you really want. So once you've allowed the wound to close, once you've learned to forgive and to let go of that pain, now you can go into pondering, what do I want from this relationship? Do I want to go back into a community with this person? Do I want to have a close connection with this person again? Or do I just want to be in the same space with them and not feel awkward? Like, do I want to be able to at least go to the grocery store and not have to avoid, turn my cart the other direction because I don't want to be anywhere near them? I can actually go to them and ask them, how's your day and how are the wife and kids? And then move on. Right? So you got to ponder your relationship. And then after you ponder what level of relationship you want, then you can work on reconciliation. Figure out if reconciliation is available. Figure out if that's even an option. Figure out at what level do you want to have that person in your life. And then you move into them. So the first 4 things are all you. And number 5 and number 6, you assess their trustworthiness, and you look for evidence of real change. That is on them. But 1 through 4 is on you. 1 through 4 is you analyzing, how do I make sure I heal? How do I make sure I learn to forgive so I'm not the one holding on to pain and bitterness? How do I make sure that I can ponder what I want from this relationship? And how do I start the process of reconciliation? And then once I communicate that, how do I assess trustworthiness, which is the 5 observable behaviors, just in case you're wondering. And then number 6 is look for evidence of real change, which is the track record, which is we're going to learn next week. But in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 13, it says, make straight your paths for your feet so that if any part is lame, it will be healed rather than injured more seriously. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 13 says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord has forgiven you. And this is like the harsh reality right here because, like I said, forgiveness is not easy. But when I am reminded of the forgiveness that God has shown me, the grace and mercy that God has shown me, it is encouraging and motivating to learn to forgive. And understanding, especially when you understand that when you learn to forgive others of the pain that they've caused you, you're not freeing them, you're freeing yourself. You're freeing yourself from that pain. And then if you choose to enter back into a relationship with them, at that point you're pondering what level of relationship you want to have with that person, and then making sure that they have the observable traits to enter into that relationship with you, because you still got to put the boundaries in your life to take care of yourself. You got to put the boundaries in your life to make sure that you can have a relationship with other humans and not continue to be let down and hurt and betrayed. Because at that point, you're going to lose faith in all humans. And then you won't want to have a relationship with any human, which in turn will hurt your relationship with God. Because if you love God, you're going to love his sheep. And if you learn to love God and have a relationship with God, you're going to learn to have a relationship with those in your life at some level. Now Peter, going back to Peter's life, when he showed up with all these characteristics of what characteristics look like, and organizations and businesses and sports organizations have taken those characteristic traits and have used them, before he arrived to that place, as you know, he was coming from a place of humility. He was coming from a place where he did not believe he had the higher ground in being able to speak into what a life of character looks like. But the reason why he was able to write that is because he arrived to the place of saying, through Christ, I can have a life of character. And my character can be tested in moments of where desperation is high. And so 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3 and 4, it's the prep up to what the life of character looks like. And it says, by God's divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. We have received all of this by coming to know him, the one who called us to himself by the means of his marvelous glory and excellence. And because of his glory and his excellence, he has given us great and precious promises. These are the promises that enable you to share his divine nature and escape the world's corruption caused by human desires. So what Peter is saying, listen, you're not strong enough to do this on your own. Your human heart does not have the ability to be able to demonstrate these characteristics. But through the power of God and through the help of Christ, Christ can walk you through these areas. And there's going to be areas in your life that you're holding on to closely. And there's going to be areas in your life that you're going to be struggling with handing over to God. But through the power of God and through the power of Jesus Christ, walking you down this journey, you can learn to let go of the things that you've been holding on to so tight because of pain of the past, or because of hurt, or because of betrayal, or because of whatever has caused it. You can learn to let that go because of the power of the Holy Spirit working through you. So Peter is saying these qualities can become your qualities through the help of Jesus Christ. When you become a fully devoted follower of Christ, you now are no longer depending on your own strength, your own wisdom, your own ability. You now can let go and let God's power step into your life to make a difference in the areas that you can't. It's kind of like God is saying this. You don't have to be God. You can let me be God and let me work through you. How about you just be human and let me be God? And you surrender the areas in your life that you've been trying to hold on to for so long, and let me work through those areas. And it's kind of like this conversation I had with God where it's this aha moment hit me, where I was asking him to change and use his ability in the areas that benefit me. And finally he just said, you know what, Moses, you know what the difference between you and I is? I said, what's that, God? He said, I'm never trying to be you. And I'm like, ooh, you have to be so rough around the edges around that. And I was like, but it was like an aha moment. I'm like, that is true. Why is it that I'm always trying to be God in my life when God is never trying to be me in his life? And what are the areas in my life that I'm struggling with giving the control over to God? What are the areas in my life that I'm struggling with being God in? And why don't I just hand those over to God and say, God, you be God, and I will just be Moses, and you use your power through me to change me. And so that's the message I have for you today, is what are the areas in your life where you're trying to be God? What are the areas in your life that you have been holding on to and you've been struggling with letting God take control over? Is it one area? Is it two areas? Is it insecurity? Is it control? Is it a career? Is it a relationship? What is the area in your life you've been struggling with handing over to God? And could today be the day where you allow God to make a difference in your life, and through the power of Christ, you start to show the characteristics that God would love to see through you when you allow him and you let go and you let him take over.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that he's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321 one. And the third way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the fourth way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you and thank you for watching our online service today.